Football is back, and so is winning season at MyBookie. Use promo code Gators to claim your deposit bonus, and for a limited time, get a free chip to use in the MyBookie casino. Head to mybookie.ag to bet anything, anytime, anywhere with MyBookie. Support for Gators Breakdown is also brought to you by Manscaped. Don't take a chance while trimming below the waist. Take 20% off. Get free worldwide shipping with the code Gators20 at manscaped.com.
Gators Breakdown, because there's never a dull moment in Gator Nation.
The Gators Breakdown podcast is ready to go. I am your host, David Waters. You can find me on Twitter, X, whatever it is, at GatorDave_SEC. Same thing for my co-host, Will Miles. You can find him there at Will Miles SEC and the site readandreaction.com. And, Will, it is never a dull moment. Second episode of today. Wardell Mack commits earlier to the Gators. And you know how we do it here. We just chug along. Fall camp. Hey, you know what? The best thing about it, I joked about it in the episode earlier. Football season might be on the horizon, but it's still recruiting season.
Well, it's always recruiting season these days. It's kind of nice, isn't it, to have a class that's ranked in the top 5 and hope about what might be coming in the future here for this team. And there was somebody from Florida State on Twitter or on X the other day I saw making fun of the fact that the Gators have like 4 of the best 10 linebacker prospects. Like, you're stacking prospects there. Why are you wasting it? I'm like, I don't care. It's 4 of the best 10 prospects in a position. I'm good to go, especially since we haven't had good linebacker play in like a decade in Gainesville. So, if that's what the Florida State fans have to focus on, that we're signing too many good players at one position, I think I'll smile, get ready for the season, and enjoy the fact that recruiting season is also August through February, not just in June and July.
Yeah, that comment. If you're watching on YouTube, I am reaching as far as I possibly can right now. That's a reach. That's a reach by that Florida State fan. So, whatever you got to do to cope. I mean, they got a good class, too. I don't know what I saw that, too. It was kind of ridiculous. But, anyway, second episode of today. If you haven't checked it out yet, Wardell Mack from Louisiana, committed to the Gators. You can check that episode out after you listen and watch this one right here. Hit that like button. Subscribe to Gators Breakdown if you haven't done so yet. Everybody, thanks for hopping on live right here on another Monday night episode. Subscribe to Gators Breakdown if you haven't done so yet here on YouTube. I think we're about the next milestone is 12,000. I don't know if we can, about 300 away, I think, before the season starts. I just noticed that. So I don't know if we can get there before the season starts or not, but maybe we can. So share it.
We should be able to get there before the episode's over, man. If you're listening and you haven't subscribed, go click on it. Come on. What are you doing?
300 away there. So to the next milestone. But yeah, I mean, hey, if we get it tonight, that'd be awesome. But yeah. Listen, all that good stuff. Share it out there. Maybe we can get there. Like, subscribe. Also, Gators Breakdown Plus, of course. All the stuff going on there. Chats going on. You get all those ad-free episodes. For football season right around the corner. The ads are going to be rolling in if you don't want to hear me talk about Manscaped or anything like that. Well, there's a way to take care of that. You can go Gators Breakdown Plus, get those ad-free episodes. If you don't bet or whatever, you don't have to worry about it. But hopefully, you support Gators Breakdown by taking care of our sponsors, or you can forego it right here. Gators Breakdown Plus, extra episodes, ad-free episodes. You get access to the Discord server, Q&A, giveaways, custom shout-outs, all that stuff. Link is in the description for Gators Breakdown Plus. So plenty to get into this episode. I'm going to go back to the scrimmage last week, Will, and run that Billy Napier soundbite of what he liked from the scrimmage and what he didn't like. The issues in open field tackling, and I think that's a good time to look at the running back room. We'll go to the safety position as well with R.J. Moten, and maybe we'll have time to get to Tyreek Sapp. If not, I'll save his thoughts for later on this week in an episode. But plenty to get into from on the heels of the first scrimmage last week. I reviewed it a little bit. I'm sure you guys at Reading Reaction talked about it too, you and Nick, and what went on there in that first scrimmage. But we got a lot to talk about here with the running back room and R.J. Moten back there on the back end.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, I think there's a lot of things that we just don't really know what we're going to see. I think
Yeah.
safety is one of those spots where we anticipate Kamari Wilson and Miguel Mitchell are going to be a big part of it, but the fact that they went out and got Moten, I think, is the thing that you look at and say, all right, what does that really mean for the room? How do these guys play? And hearing what Napier has to say about all that is an important part of what we're going to learn throughout fall camp, and understanding not only who the starters are going to be, but what do they have in terms of depth if one of those guys happens to go down.
Yeah, absolutely. So lots to get into, safety room, but let's go back. I will go back. We'll get Billy Napier's thoughts on the scrimmage to kind of introduce, what we're going to do here the rest of this episode.
I think for the most part, I was pleased with the scrimmage. I thought we could have, in space, we didn't necessarily tackle as well as maybe we would like in the secondary. But I do think that there was a lot of quality football in terms of the precision. The film is cleaner. I do think some of the players we were without affected the quality of the twos, in my opinion, because of the depth. But there's a mixture of lineups out there with those groups. But I think when we put our first group out there, it's starting to look what it's supposed to look like. And then don't get me wrong. I mean, there's a lot of players in that second group that do a really good job. I just think we had a handful of players out that affected the depth, the quality of the scrimmage in that regard.
So Florida posted some highlights of of that first scrimmage right there on social media. So I'm going to play a couple of these highlights. I'll probably have to replay it a couple of times because went and handpicked out what Billy Napier was talking about there, and the open field tackles. And hey, look, you see most of these because of it was what the running backs were doing. Montrell Johnson, Trevor Etienne, just highlights galore there. You see him breaking tackles, stiff arms, breaking more tackles. I mean, there you see it over and over again. And look, it mainly come from the running back spots. And I mean, that had to be, not trying to connect too many dots there, but those highlights there probably go hand in hand with what Billy Napier saw right there in that first scrimmage. So hey, look, not surprised. Look, Will, it goes two ways. I mean, don't get me wrong. I love to see my running backs doing that. I love to see Trevor Etienne. I love to see Montrell Johnson doing that. But at the same time, it goes back to just the bad memories we have of this secondary not being the open field tackle. Trey Dean lately, Torrance lately, Donovan Steiner lately as well. Just going back to recent history here. It's just been way too long since we've had play on the back end in that safety room. That where it just has not been up to a level there. So it's hard to know. That's the beauty of spring practice, or not necessarily the beauty of it, but the puzzling part of spring practice, fall camp. You're going against yourselves. One side does one thing good, the other side does things bad at the same time. Hard to know where to take it, but we do have some highlights right there that I think go along with what Billy Napier was trying to say there.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like you said, it's always a question of which side of the double-edged sword is it. The only thing is you can't tell in any of those highlights you showed whether those were counters, because if they were counter plays, then I'd be really disturbed. But look, I mean, fall camp, it's hard to get up for it. You start to get tired. The running backs still feel strong, especially if you're rotating 3 or 4 guys in there. And yeah, those are really skilled players. In fact, that's the place on offense where we point at and say, I really, really, really hope this is the strength of the offense, because it should be, given the fact that these guys have already shown that they can be really effective players in the SEC. Now, it does suggest that in some ways the offensive line is doing some stuff too, right? These guys are getting downfield into the secondary. But again, it's the secondary's job to get those guys on the ground. And the highlights you're showing there, yeah, some of that is the running backs, but some of that is guys who are tentative when they're going to tackle. Some of that is guys who just aren't wrapping up. And, I don't anticipate that every problem we saw last year is going to be solved. Like anyone who expects this to be a top 10 or top 15 defense has seen some film from Austin Armstrong that I didn't see when he was at Southern Mississippi. I think Armstrong is going to be the kind of guy who goes for a big time kill shot, and he's also going to be the guy who gives up a bunch of big plays. And part of that is going to be exacerbated if the team can't tackle in the back end. So, again, is it the running backs? It's good that it's running backs, that it's not wide receivers who are busting through the tackles, I suppose. But Yeah, I mean, you just can't tell because of the way it is in camp. And I will say that the one good thing is it feels like the running backs in those highlights are getting into open space, which suggests that the offensive line is at least holding its own, because given some of the injuries that they've had on the offensive line, some of the guys they've had to hold out, all that sort of stuff, you would figure that would be a unit that's struggling. And so, hey, if the running backs are getting downfield, then good. That bodes well for Florida's offensive line.
Absolutely. So you saw it there in the highlights. We're talking running backs here. Let's get to hear from Trevor Etienne. And we did not get to hear from him a good bit last year. You know, him being a true freshman, Trevor Etienne being that true freshman, and Billy Napier, kind of his rule of kind of keeping the true freshman sheltered from the media just a bit. You know, I think Twitter Spaces and stuff, he was around that about a year ago. But now we get to hear from Trevor Etienne in front of the media, dating back to spring a little bit, and here in fall camp as well. So here's Etienne on his first year and the transition to year 2.
I feel like that comes with development. I mean, I'm getting older. I'm learning. I know how to prepare my body, know how to recover, how to get treatment. So I feel like definitely like becoming a better person, better athlete with the building definitely comes with progress. I feel like I just started playing the game of football when I got here, but like just like with coaching, like my pass protection, I had to learn that. I mean, coming from high school, we ran a veer. We were just running the ball a lot. So definitely pass protection is something I feel like I should need to improve on most.
I think we made a lot about your abilities as a running back, but as a blocker, how do you think you've improved from where you were a year ago?
Just like I said, more attention to detail, knowing which guy to block, communication with the O-line. Like they've been helping me a lot recently just by communicating with me before the snap. So like now I know which guy to block, know which possible threats are coming. So I feel like that has gotten better, and that'll help my pass game.
All right, where he wants to improve the most, well, by pass blocking, and good for him. You know, he says, "Hey, we got to go back to my high school days, and we're running the veer. You know, we're running the ball a lot. I don't have to pass protect." And you know, now he's sitting out venturing and trying to garner help from an offensive line. You know, and to help with communication there. I mean, look, he's a true freshman. There's a lot to learn. I mean, he's game 1 out there versus Utah, making plays, making highlight runs, making highlight catches, and not disappointed by any means if he's got room to grow as a pass blocker. It's nothing that really stands out as a huge weakness that we saw last year. But yeah, if you're going to be that all-around back, if you're going to be in this main rotation there with Montreal Johnson, we want to see Trevor Etienne on the field as much as possible. And the way we're going to see him on the field as much as possible is growing as a player, developing as a player, and really that next step. We know he's the playmaker. I mean, can he get better as a pure running back? Sure. He'll even admit that. Don't get me wrong. He doesn't have a long way to go. He did pretty good last year. But if we're going to sit here and say, hey, where can he get better? Where do we want to see him on the field even more, where it's less predictable for a defense? Let's get that pass blocking there a little bit better as well with the experience that he can get there now in his second year.
Yeah, I mean, look, he was allowed to make mistakes last year in many ways because Anthony Richardson was able to bail everybody out. The Florida offense didn't give up a whole lot of sacks last year, but sometimes that was because Richardson was faster than anybody on the field, and he was able to really take advantage of that and get out of troubling situations where maybe he shouldn't have. So, if you were the running back and you missed a block, yeah, that's something you go and look at on film, but it didn't kill you. This year with Graham Mertz, that's going to kill you. Like, it's going to be a sack if you completely blow an assignment, if you don't stone the guy who comes in on a blitz, if you don't give him the time to get the ball out. I think, or if you don't know what your hot read is, right? Because sometimes it's not necessarily the running back who's picking up the guy. Sometimes he's the outlet. He's the guy who, when the quarterback gets in trouble, is going to get the pass. So knowing what your assignment is, knowing where to go, all that's a huge part of playing that position. In fact, I can remember 4 or 5 years ago, Jordan Scarlett not playing very much. And people kept asking, why is Scarlett not playing? And then every time you saw him in pass protection, you went, well, that's why he's not playing. And then he got way better at it, and all of a sudden he was a really effective weapon for Florida a year or two after that. And so it's great that Etienne is recognizing that, knows that that's what he needs to do. And then, but he's also competing for time with a guy who's pretty skilled in his own right. And so I don't necessarily expect that Florida's going to all of a sudden turn the reins over to him and Montreal Johnson is going to be in the background. I think what's going to end up happening is going to be a lot like what we saw last year. To me, the question at the running back position is who's going to be able to step up in the passing game, because there are going to be a lot of times where that outlet pass that just wasn't taken last year is going to be open. And
that is a tease for later, Will.
All right. Well, there you go. So that to me is the question, right? I mean, yeah, you got to know pass protection, but more than anything, you just have to know your assignment, because Graham Mertz, for all the things that he does well, Their mobility is not one of them. And so he's not going to buy extra time. He's not going to float around in the pocket waiting for some guy to come open 30 yards downfield. And even if the guy does come open 30 yards downfield, he doesn't have the same arm Anthony Richardson does. Heck, nobody in the NFL has that kind of arm. So, so it's just going to be different, which means that assignment football is going to be way more important this year. So it's good to hear him talking about that.
Yeah, good point. Definitely be more instrumental this year without the mobile quarterback. And I think Graham Mertz is athletic and can escape, but not the level of what we were accustomed to.
He had negative rushing yards over his career and negative rushing yards in every year that he was the quarterback there at Wisconsin. Now, granted, he got sacked a lot.
Right, yeah, there you go.
But I mean, Anthony Richardson ran for like 600 yards last year. So there's a major difference between those two guys specifically. And look, Mertz is not a statue. It's not, Chris Winkie back there or something, but it's also he's not going to be if a defensive end goes free, like on that 2-point conversion for Utah last year where Richardson spun out of it and then kind of faked it and then made the throw to the corner. That play ain't happening. If we leave a defensive end unblocked, the 2-point conversion just isn't happening, and that's okay, right? I mean, there's only one Anthony Richardson, and there were times that he was awesome last year, and there were times that he wasn't. And that's not what they're going to be asking from Mertz or anyone else on the roster, right? They're going to be asking for all of these guys to do their job more consistently than they did last year. And, whether that turns into a better product overall, I don't know, but I suspect we won't get the stinkers like we did in the second half against Florida State and the second half against Kentucky. But we also don't get the big-time plays that you get in, like, the first half against Florida State. And so there's that balance.
Yep. Well, interesting. I talked heavy about this Friday when it was the post-scrimmage press conference. And Trevor Etienne was asked about it. We'll feature just him before we zoom back out to the running backs as a whole. But here's his thoughts on him being kick returner for the Gators. And we're all going to come back on the other side and ask you a question about it.
Like just paying more, like watching more film with kickoff returns, me just paying more attention to it. Like last year I could say like I wasn't as locked in as I should have been. I mean, being a freshman coming from high school, I didn't watch as much film as I needed to. So just being like on myself, staying more on myself.
What do you think are the potential for the return units this year, and maybe for you in particular? I mean, do you want to pop one, or what's your goals?
I mean, of course, we all want to score a touchdown kickoff return, but I mean, just working hard in practice and staying dedicated to the grind. I feel like that'll come with the success. Will come with that. So I feel like as long as we stay locked in and focused on what we need to do as a team, good things will happen.
All right, Will, question I asked myself, and I'll see if you agree, disagree. Fan base can, our listeners here can chime in as well. Do you want to see Trevor Etienne on kickoff return? Is he too valuable as a running back where you don't want to take the risk and he gets injured? Or do you, and the way I thought was that don't have a problem with it. We don't know how explosive this offense can be. We don't know how successful this offense can be. If they are starting drives at the 40-yard line near midfield, that might be their pathway to scoring more. Instead of 10, 12-play drives, you're whittling it down to 6, 7, 8-play drives because you're starting drives near midfield. And when Trevor Etienne got on the field last year as a kick returner, you saw immediate improvement at that position.
Yeah, I mean, so I think whenever you're asking this question, you have to ask compared to what. So
good point.
So if Eugene Wilson turns out to be a guy who can take the ball to the house for kickoff returns, then no, I don't want to see Trevor Etienne returning kicks. But if those guys are not just head and shoulders better than him, then yes, because that is the deepest position on the team. So even if Etienne were to go down, hopefully he doesn't, but even if he did go down with an injury, you still have Montreal Johnson, Cam Carroll, and then Trayon Webb coming off the bench there as depth. The other thing is where running backs tend to get hurt. They tend to get hurt when they're getting brought down in a scrum and you end up with like a high ankle sprain, or they get a concussion because a linebacker comes in from the side and hits them right in the helmet with a shoulder pad or a knee or a helmet or something like that. Like it's the scrum. It's the not seeing the hit coming that seems to be the thing that injures running backs. So Etienne's going to see that when he's returning kickoffs, right? Is he moving fast? Absolutely. But he's also skilled at doing that, and skilled, like he's one of those guys who sort of avoids contact. So I'm not really that worried. And then the third thing is that we've had multiple discussions about the depth at the wide receiver position. I'm assuming that's who you'd have in there as a kick returner if you didn't have Etienne. And there's no depth there at all, right? I mean, you can't have Pearsall returning kicks. Like if he gets injured, oh my goodness, what are you doing then?
He is gonna be returning punts.
Well, and we'll see about that. I think one turned ankle or one time where Mertz just chucks one up to him and he brings down a prayer and they go, maybe he's a little bit too valuable. Now against Utah, maybe that's what you do, right? Because you feel like you need that extra edge. And that I think is the other thing there, Dave, is that they don't have the luxury of putting in a less talented player in a position that can change the game. This team is not good enough to bring it to go, oh, well, we'll turn down 6 points in this game because of field position, even if 2 kick returns turns into field goals, right? They aren't going to have that luxury. They're going to play a lot of close games. They're going to rely on Graham Mertz to keep it close. They're going to ask him to manage the game and not turn the ball over. They're going to ask the defense to get a couple of big plays, and they're going to try to win a bunch of games 20-17 or 17-13. I don't think they want to win a bunch of games 38-35, and I'm not sure they have the capability of winning the games 38-35, at least on a regular basis, which means you got to get every edge you can. And one of those edges is Etienne is a good kick returner, might even be an elite kick returner. And so to just go, well, I'm going to take away one of the things he does well because I'm afraid he might get hit. Well, with that logic, then you should never give him the ball as a running back because he might get injured, right? I mean, at some point, you got to put the guy out there and say, like, your goal as an offensive coordinator is to get Trevor Etienne the ball in space.
Yep.
So when the ball's kicked off to him, you've just achieved getting Trevor Etienne the ball in space. So why would you take that away? So I get it. I understand. If you have someone behind him who's better, then yeah, I would love to see him as a running back exclusively, but there's not the margin with this team that I think they're going to be able to do that. I think they're going to have to eke out every single point they get. They're going to have to earn every single point they get. Now, I think they can do that against some of the teams on their schedule. And I think some of the other teams have holes in their rosters, just like Florida does, that they have to answer those questions. But Florida's already answered the question last year about who their best kick returner is. It was pretty clearly Etienne. And so to take away that weapon just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me.
Yeah, I'm like you do. Until I see what this offense does, and hey, look, I mean, maybe Trey Wilson comes out there and he is the better kick return, like you said. Then okay, you do that, but we do know we at least at bare minimum have a pretty good kick returner here in Trevor Etienne. So, all right, let's zoom back out. We'll go back to the running backs and what Trevor Etienne's thoughts are on that room, starting with transfer Cam Carroll.
Just the knowledge and experience. Like he's been in college longer than any one of us, so he's been through things that we haven't. So we can ask him questions, and he can kind of help us and guide us through those situations. So just having that older guy in the room definitely helps a lot.
He seems very comfortable catching the ball. What's he bring just in terms of physical abilities?
I feel like Cam is an all-around back. I mean, at times I feel like he doesn't know how big he is, and I mess with him all the time for that. But I feel like he's a well-rounded back. I mean, bigger guy, too. I feel like he comes downhill. I mean, I know I wouldn't want to tackle him. So I just feel like, yeah, he's a well-rounded back.
I think Montreal mentioned that he was even picking up things from Cam, that Cam was giving him, pointers on his game. Have you picked up anything from him? Has he given you advice that's helped already?
Definitely. I mean, one of the greatest things about our running back room is we all learn from each other. Like, we can take information from the freshmen and apply it to our game. And just like coming from Cam, an older guy, we can learn from him too. So I feel like having all of us to help each other is definitely a tool that helps us be a better.
Even though you're only a second-year guy, are you helping Trayon at all? Are you giving him instructions? And where's he at right now in your mind?
I feel like Trayon is definitely he's one of the well-rounded backs too. I feel like we're at a point where we all want to see each other do great. So we all helping each other and pushing each other to be the best that we can be.
Montreal said you guys don't have any goals that you guys set for yourselves as a duo, but do you just have a mindset going into this year about what you guys want to accomplish?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like once you set goals, you set a limit on yourself. So we want to set no limits. The sky is the limit, and there's footprints on the moon. So, I mean, we just, whatever happens, happens, and we just want to be the best that we can be. So we push each other daily.
Man, Will, that pumped up there. I mean, Trevor Etienne's really good on the mic, and coming right there was, man, we don't, no, there's no stat measure or anything. We're not going to limit ourselves. It don't matter what number we put there. We're going to exceed it. I like the mindset there from the sophomore, second year running back here for the Gators. But we'll get to Cam Carroll in just a moment because we'll hear from him too. But where I wanted to go with this is let's go back to a year ago just a bit and the way the season started. And it was pretty clear. Billy Napier wanted to use 3 running backs at the beginning of last year. Naquan Wright, Montrell Johnson, and Trevor Etienne. We all saw them a good bit in that Utah game early in the season as well. And as the season whittled on, it got, the carries got whittled down. And it was mainly just Etienne and Johnson carrying the load from the backfield. But it was clear early that I think if Billy Napier would have had his preference, he would have been using 3 backs and keeping those guys fresh. But those Johnson, Etienne were head and shoulders the more productive backs. They needed the ball more than any other running backs in their hands. But now Cam Carroll coming in, I think it really does give Florida that 3-headed monster again. And I know we're all excited about the duo of Johnson and Etienne. And I think when this season's over with, they will have the bulk of the carries. But I do think, now there's probably going to be a little more confidence in getting a third back carries throughout the season and not just a portion of the season.
Well, we'll see. I mean, Naquan Wright was a player who really didn't necessarily fit the scheme that these guys were trying to run in terms of that zone blocking scheme, put your foot in the ground and go north and south. He was much more of a guy who wants to get the outside, use his speed, somebody who was going to be a threat in the passing game. And with some of the limitations for Anthony Richardson, the passing game side of it never really worked out. But he did give them sort of that threat, right, where you might throw it to him and you had to worry about that. I think that's the thing that you're going to have to see develop with the 3 guys now, Carroll, Johnson, and Etienne, is that one of them is going to have to be a threat, hopefully all of them a threat in the passing game where they can open things up that way. I do think that you'll probably see more 2 running back sets because you think about what Billy Napier has done previously where he's had, 12 personnel where he's doing a lot of stuff with tight ends. Well, you can do kind of similar stuff with running backs who are skilled if they can block. And so if those guys can block, if they can sort of, at least approximate what a fullback would be some of the time, then all of a sudden having 2 running backs back there can really be a 2-headed monster where the defense doesn't know what to do because those guys are too physical for the linebackers and too fast for the linebackers as well. And too physical for the safeties. And so I think that's a couple of things that we can be looking for. But in terms of like 3 of them, yeah, I think I go back to who are the most talented players on the field. And last year, the most talented players on the field were Johnson, Etienne, and Anthony Richardson, and those guys got the ball a lot. So if Carroll steps in and shows that he's just as talented, okay, that's cool. Now you got to find some other guys to go along with that. But they're all going to get their shots because the reality is that for all the benefits that we got from having that 2-headed monster last year, once Naquan Wright was sort of sequestered to a couple of carries a game, having another guy who could come in and pop and punish the defense and just make the defense go, geez, another fresh guy coming in gives you sort of that. I mean, it's a lot like, and it was done a different way, but that 2012 team with Gillisley, where in the 4th quarter, he just absolutely obliterated LSU. And he did the same thing to Florida State later in the year. That is a possibility when you've got 3 guys like this, because all of a sudden in the 3rd quarter, when the defense is like, hey, that guy finally needs a blow because he just ran a 25-yard run. It's like, oh, they bring in somebody who's just as fresh, who can run over you as well. So, yeah, I mean, I expect him to go all 3. I still think it's going to be Johnson and Etienne 1-1A with Carroll probably as I don't want to say change of pace, but as the guy who's sort of brought in to really drop the shoulder and drop the hammer on the defense when you think you need that. But Carroll didn't come here to not play. And so he's going to get some carries, and I'm sure he was promised some carries based on his film and what they expect. And yeah, like you said, they had 3 guys last year, but it's so hard for me to imagine that they're going to take the ball out of Etienne and Johnson's hands, right? Like if you're thinking about like, every coach always has that you got to get the ball to that guy list. And when I start going down the line on the offense, like Etienne is the number 1 guy that I want to get the ball to. Johnson is the number 2 guy I want to get the ball to. Pearsall is the number 3 guy I want to get the ball to. And it may end up being that Cam Carroll is the number 4 guy on that list. But, it's hard when you've got guys at one position, especially when you've got guys who are on that I want to get him the ball list. because running backs especially, right? If the offensive line isn't playing great, if somebody gets hit behind the line of scrimmage, it doesn't give you that opportunity to sort of establish yourself, get your rhythm, and all of a sudden turn into a big gain. So like that run last year against South Carolina that Etienne had, like those sorts of gashes, they happen, but let's be honest, I think Etienne is a little bit more slippery than Montrell Johnson. So if you had Johnson in there, does that turn into a 30-yard run rather than an 80-yard run? I just don't know. And so I look at it and I go, I want Etienne to get the ball as much as humanly possible, but I want him to get the ball against Georgia and LSU and Florida State. And so if that means that we're giving Carroll the ball against Kentucky and Tennessee, hey, that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited. Go back and then, we'll come back to Cam Carroll, but you look at his numbers, just attempts, 72 in 2019, 122 in 20, and 111 in 21. Yeah, I mean, he's used to getting the rock. He's used to getting the ball, and injured a bit last year, and now comes to Florida, and we'll see what he does. But we'll hear from him, just coming up in just a second. But hey, man, it's football season, and I know everybody is really waiting to get those bets in. Football is back, and so is winning season at MyBookie, NFL, college, and a brand new cash-out system to give you options to bet and win all season long. First two legs of your parlay hit, cash out early and use the funds on another bet, or let it ride for a chance at a bigger payday. Use early cash outs as a tool to stay in control of the action at MyBookie. To get started, go to mybookie.ag now and register for a free account. When you're ready to make your first deposit, just use promo code Gators to grab a welcome bonus on the house. That's promo code Gators to claim your deposit bonus, and for a limited time, you get a free chip to use in the MyBookie casino. You can bet anything, anytime, anywhere, only with MyBookie. And support for Gators Breakdown is also brought to you by Manscaped, the best in men's below-the-waist grooming. Manscaped's Performance Package 4.0. It's the ultimate men's hygiene bundle. Get 20% off plus free worldwide shipping with the code Gators20 at manscaped.com. That delivery of the Performance Package 4.0 comes in that beautiful box and lets you know right away that the modern man is a man who takes care of himself. Manscaping isn't just for life special occasions. It's a requirement for optimal health, superior hygiene, and healthy self-esteem. You now have the right tools for a safe and precise grooming in the hard-to-navigate sensitive groin area, plus post-trimming products to keep your boys dry and fresh all day long. Well, that Performance Package 4.0 includes the Lawnmower 4.0, the fourth-generation waterproof trimmer, features a cutting-edge ceramic blade to reduce grooming accidents. The Performance Package 4.0 also includes the Weed Whacker, the nose and ear trimmer that actually works. And guys, right now, we know it's hot out there. The Crop Preserver Ball Deodorant and the Crop Reviver Ball Toner make sure you stay fresh in all that heat. Manscaped even throws in 2 free gifts to the Performance Package 4.0, the Manscaped Boxer Briefs, and the Shed Travel Bag. Get 20% off, plus free shipping with the code Gators20 at manscaped.com. One more time, that's 20% off, plus free worldwide shipping with the code Gators20 at manscaped.com. All right, back to football talk right here. We're going to continue with these running backs. And, yeah, we'll get to Cam Carroll. First time we get to hear from him as a Gator. And all about, him transferring to Florida and this Florida Gator running back room.
For me, entering the portal, it was a kind of well thought out decision. And once I entered, Coach Jalute reached out to me. I sent him my transcript and talked with Coach Napier, and it felt like home. Being able to be in a room with guys like Trevor and Montrell, it obviously would fear a lot of people, but me personally, I took it as an opportunity to not only learn from them, but to also grow.
What is that whole kind of share the ball mentality in there? I mean, Trayon had a couple great runs one practice week. We're able to see the whole thing too, so it's pretty deep run.
Yes, sir. We learn from each other. We boost each other up. We have a very loving, very tight relationship within that room. We always hang out. We always help each other whenever we can, and most importantly, we cheer each other on. We're each other's biggest fans.
Well, Trevor was saying and I think Montrell said it too, that you offer kind of a mentor role. a little bit of experience. I mean, you were in you're in the class of 2018. You've been around.
Yes, sir. So just being an older guy in the room, I've played a lot of football. I've been around for a while, so I sometimes try to help them, understand and find their reads quicker, being able to help them get out, helping them with techniques, different things of that matter, just being able to help them with their game so we can all help each other.
Everybody looks at you as 230-pound back and they think, okay, you're a between the tackles guy. What do you do that's going to surprise people?
A lot of people would be surprised to know that I've hit just about right at 22 miles per hour at 230. So I might be big, but I can also, if I get out on the edge, you're still going to have a hard time.
Well, we saw a glimpse of it in the spring game a little bit, that speed and that agility that he brings and hurdling people in the spring game. And, hey, I'm excited to see the guy. Honestly, of course, like all of us out there, we probably didn't know much about Cam Carroll coming from Tulane, and then he transfers to Florida. And I think we all started doing a little bit of digging and all that. But, good to hear from him and also, what he likes. And, hey, another element of speed to this offense. But, all-around back. You heard Etienne call him an all-around back. And I think we've kind of put that label of a physical, maybe even bruising type of runner, but man, 22 miles an hour around the edge. I mean, maybe he's fibbing a little bit, but I mean, I'm sure it's documented somewhere that he's got that 22 mile an hour speed. So, hey, I maybe at some point, maybe in just a couple of weeks when Florida's on the road at Utah, we get to see that 22 mile an hour speed around the edge out there from Cam Carroll.
I mean, we'll find out, right? I think football speed is different than straight line speed anyway, especially at the running back position. A good example, and obviously not a running back, but a good example is Kadarius Toney a couple of years ago, where all of a sudden, like, he completely changes direction and the defense is left just grasping for air. And so in many ways, that's one of the things that you want to see in a running back is the ability to change directions and or run over people, right? I think Carroll has shown in some of his tape that he's capable of running over people. The question is going to be how many opportunities is he given and how many opportunities are the running backs given to do that? I do think it's interesting. They're basically like calling him the old man in the room. So he comes in, he's embracing that role, which is interesting. But I mean, he's 22 years old, something like that. And he's ancient. Now, I mean, that is interesting when you think about it that way, because there are not a lot of guys who classify as seniors on this team in general. There's only 6 that I have who are classified as seniors. And Zipper is one of the guys who's hurt. You got Lindell Hudson, who's a transfer coming in. You got Zanders and Pearsall on the offensive side. And then everybody else is either a junior, sophomore, redshirt freshman, redshirt sophomore. And what that means is that a guy like Carroll has played a ton of football compared to these other guys. And, he says it, and I'm like, yeah, you've been around for a little while. You're kind of an older player. And then I'm like, oh yeah, there aren't any older players around. Like, the only guy you could go to and ask for that kind of level of experience out on the field is Pearsall. He's the only guy who's played that many games, and it's a completely different position. So when you think about Johnson and Etienne and Webb and who they can go to ask about different situations in the game, it absolutely is Cam Carroll. He is somebody who has a level of experience that just none of the rest of them have. And given that they're breaking in a new offensive line at just about every position other than center and maybe right tackle, given that they're breaking in those guys, there's going to be some mistakes made up front. And so I think Carroll, coming from Tulane, probably could teach them how to deal with that a little bit better, right? That he's going to, he's coming from a program where I'm sure there were missed blocks from time to time, or they were playing against teams that were just more physical than them and unable to hold up. And he will have experience in how to deal with because that's the thing, right? I mean, I think most people can deal with the success. The question is, how do you deal with the failure when things aren't going your way? And is Carroll going to be able to sort of be that guiding force or the guiding light that allows the guys to get through a game where maybe they're struggling? Because we saw last year against Oregon State, that just wasn't the case, right? When they couldn't get the running game going at all, then it wasn't like all of a sudden they popped a couple of runs. It was just the running game kind of went away. And, it's just late in the season, too. I mean, Vanderbilt, the last game of the season, they couldn't run the ball hardly. Yeah. So, I mean, now look, some of that's on the offensive line, but some of that is the running back has to make somebody miss, right? Like, you got to make the play when it's there. You can't get tripped up. to where you get a 4-yard gain when it could have been 40. And, I think Carroll brings a level of experience that hopefully keeps the not too high, not too low when it comes to the emotional spectrum, right? And I'm not sure that Etienne and Johnson really need that much. It seems like they're kind of old souls. But again, when I go back and think about it, like, they're joking about him being old, but when you actually look at, he is like compared to everybody else on the offensive side of the ball, he's got more snaps than anybody. And so, not just the running backs, I think the other guys on the offense should be able to lean into that a little bit too, because he's not going to be intimidated when he gets in the huddle in a tough situation. He's been in all the different situations at the college level that you can imagine. And so I expect Carroll to be able to bring some of that stability.
I mean, good point too. I mean, I think you glossed over one important guy who has a whole ton of snaps, and that's one quarterback, Graham Mertz, as well. So, a ton of snaps there. Kingsley at center. I mean, Carroll, Pearsall. I mean, yeah, you're right. Overall, there's not a lot of experience on this team. You're relying on a lot of guys who don't have a lot of snaps, but in key situations on offense, there, center, quarterback, running back, receiver. There's one there. That you can that point to that have a lot of snaps. And I'll go back to he's probably we'll label him number 3 running back, of course, and hopefully it is a 3-headed monster here. But the third running back, probably there's a little more value on it this year because you don't have the running quarterback, you don't have a quarterback. Now I know Anthony Richardson was very inconsistent in that role last year. We all wanted him to carry the ball just a bit more, but now you're not going to have a quarterback taking 5, 10, 12 carries a game and basically being your third running back. Your third running back is actually going to be a third running back this year.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's been some stuff in camp where they've had some wide receivers back in the backfield. And so they're clearly preparing to do some stuff where they're going to try to put the defense in some conflict by having more than one guy back there. So the idea that they're just going to sit there with a quarterback in the shotgun, running read option, RPO, type actions. One, the quarterback this year, Mertz, again, has his good qualities, but he's not somebody who's going to hold that defensive end in a way that Anthony Richardson does at all, which means you're going to have to do different things off of that, which also means you might not run the exact same type of actions. And the goal of the offense is not to get the quarterback out on the edge. The goal on the offense is to put the defense in conflict. So if you've got 2 running backs back there and you sort of fake that run up the middle and then can pitch it to the outside to get another running back on the edge, well, you just had the same effect of holding that defensive end, right? Because now the defensive end can't crash because there might be a pitch that goes outside and all of a sudden there's a big play out there. So yes, the quarterback run game is going to be significantly limited compared to what it was last year. But if Billy Napier is as good as we think he might be on offense in terms of designing plays and things like that, he's going to find a way to put the defense in conflict by having interesting personnel packages out there to get the same effect, which is get a guy out in space who's more physical, faster than the linebacker and stronger than the safety. Get that guy out there in space by putting the defense in conflict. And some of that will be some of the quick game stuff that Graham Mertz is really good at. Mm-hmm. So Graham Mertz is really good when you try
RPO, my friend, RPO.
When you're trying to get the ball out quick, right? Absolutely. And these guys, if they pop it for 8 yards every time you hand it to them, well, the RPO becomes a whole lot more effective, right? Now, if you're just stopping the run with 6 guys up front and you can drop a safety and you can have guys deep, well, then the RPO becomes a lot less effective. Those windows get a lot smaller. And when those windows get smaller, you're going to start to see some of the limitations with Mertz. So, I mean, I fully anticipate them to use the running back position as an area to put the defense in conflict. I think they're going to do that somewhat with some of the wide receivers, in order to sort of get more of a passing type feel out of some of those configurations as well. But that's going to be what they're going to have to do. They're going to have to, in some ways, trick defenses into giving up their position to open up some other stuff, and the running backs could be a big part of that.
Yep, and the running backs could be a big part of that in the passing game. Out of the backfield, Will, here is Carroll and Etienne on the running back passing game.
Kevin Brockway, Gainesville Sun. Seems like also your ability to catch the ball in the backfield. I know you had one pretty good season at Tulane. What kind of element do you think you can bring there in terms of that aspect of the game?
Just being able to catch out of the backfield I feel like it's become more and more evident in the game of football today that we play. So just being able to lock in on those minor details, being able to focus on catching the ball, working with the wide receivers also helps because, they work on catching the ball each and every day. They get the balls a lot. So just being able to be around them and learn those kind of fundamental things and add those to my game.
Graham Ball Swamp 247. I think Montreal had mentioned right before the beginning of camp that Florida hadn't thrown the ball a lot to the running back unit, but that he expected that was going to be a little bit more this season. Was that an attractive thing that led you here, maybe Florida being a little more inclined to utilize the running backs in the passing game this season?
Just being able to be in the SEC, to be able to be a part of such a great program is what really attracted me to this school. And also, the two guys that were returning, I know that, Florida is big on running the ball and spreading the ball out. So that was another aspect, but just most importantly, being able to be a part of such a great program.
It looks like they're throwing to the backs in practice a lot. Maybe I just didn't notice that in the spring or last year. Do you feel like Montreal said he thinks it's going to be more of an aspect to this offense? Where do you fit in there, and are you excited about that?
I'm definitely excited. It's just a way to use your weapons. We have a great offense, great weapons, great players, and I feel like the more we create space for our athletes, I feel like we have a better opportunity to score a touchdown.
There we go. Speed in space. Well, that kind of sounds like what we might get here from these running backs in this passing game. And, Harrison brings up a good point. Cam is probably the best pass catcher out of the backfield. He's definitely got a chance to show it more. And hopefully we will be saying that about Etienne and Johnson as well. And, kind of pick your poison right here with this Florida Gator running back room as far as the passing game goes. But, guys, we absolutely have seen it. And, whether it be the open practice, word from scrimmage, word from the open portions of practice, and then the warm-ups going on, you can see it. They're catching more passes in warm-ups. You heard the reporters there saying, maybe we didn't notice it before, but we certainly notice it now. That you can certainly tell that the running backs are going to be involved more in the passing game a bit. All the running backs have talked about it so far as well. So it's not really some gigantic hidden secret that this may be a revelation for the offense this year. And I want to go back. And I talked about this on Twitter. I think it was last week, and I talked about it on Gators Breakdown Plus there. So some people may have missed it last week, but this could change with the type of quarterback you have. And of course, you have an athletic running quarterback. They're going to take some of those chances away, but now with a not as athletic quarterback like Graham Mertz compared to what Billy Napier has previously had, maybe you do see the offense open up a bit more in the running back passing game. So throughout the history, you had at Billy Napier in 2018, and I forget who the quarterback was. I meant to go back and look, but I forgot. But it wasn't Levi Lewis yet. And I believe it was more of a pocket passer at Louisiana in his first year before Levi Lewis. And Trevor Goss had 25 receptions that year as a running back. Elijah Mitchell had 20. So you had 45 total receptions from the running back spot in 2018. Levi Lewis takes over. You get your more athletic quarterback. Elijah Mitchell only has 10. Raymond Calais only has 10. And Rod Goss only goes down to 6. So you went from 45 total in 18 to in 19, you had 26 total. Now, 18, there were a couple more. That was just the top two backs, and that's kind of where it was. But two backs gave you 45. Three backs only gave you 26 and 19. You go to 2020, picked up a bit there. Mitchell, Chris Smith both had 16. There's your 32 right there. Then Ragas had 9, so it was 41, but still short of 2018 where it was only 2 players. It took 3 players to get to, over 40 and 20. And in 2021, Imani Bailey had 15 receptions. Smith had 14. Montreal Johnson had 6. And then in 2022, his first year at Florida, Anthony Richardson at quarterback, of course. Johnson only had 12 catches last year. Etienne had 9. So you go back to first year at Louisiana, 45 catches between the top 2 running backs. And at Florida, the top 2 running backs only had 21. So a big stark comparison. I'm sure style of quarterbacks has a lot to do with that. So there is a little bit of history, Will, that Billy Napier will pass to the running backs.
Yeah, so I mean that year you were talking about, in 2018 at Louisiana, was Andre Nunez was the
Okay.
quarterback for Louisiana. He had 56 rushing attempts for negative 15 yards.
There we go.
So we're not talking about a mobile guy, and I think what it really suggests is that when you have a mobile quarterback, it's a risk to blitz him, right? Especially if it's a
Mhm.
guy who can't pick you apart and do that strategically. And I think that's sort of what we saw with Anthony Richardson, is that if you just dropped into a zone and you prevented him from getting outside of the pocket, eventually it would sort of collapse and you might get him down on the ground. But even if you didn't, you were asking him to make a pinpoint throw between the zone, and he could not always do that. Sometimes he did, sometimes he didn't, but he was inconsistent, which meant that the third downs didn't always get converted. I think with a guy like Mertz, you expect him to be able to make the throw against the zone, at least on a regular basis, if that's all he gets. But you also expect him to struggle when the blitz comes. Well, what's one of the ways that you counter the blitz? Screen passes, right? What's another way you do it? You have a running back who's an outlet if the blitzer doesn't come, or at least if the blitzer doesn't come in his hole, and he doesn't necessarily have to pick up that guy. So, I think a lot of it's going to depend on what they think they have on the outside and what the matchups are going to be. Because yes, there will be a lot more to the running back. I think the reason they're doing that is they've identified the running back as a place where they feel like they have a strategic advantage. And so one of the reasons why we might be seeing them have two running backs in the backfield is so that when there is a blitz, they're not limited to having to go just to their wide receivers on hot routes. They'll probably have adjustments on either side, depending upon which side the blitz comes from, to where they'll have a running back stay in and block and a running back who goes out into the pass pattern. And all of a sudden, now you get a running back on a linebacker in a matchup that you like that's favorable. So, yeah, I think obviously the fact that these guys are that Nunez and then Mertz are less mobile than Levi Lewis and Anthony Richardson plays a role in terms of where the ball goes, if for no other reason, because it has to go out quicker, right? I mean, you think about the play Richardson made years ago. I think it was against USF, where he like drifted left, and then just threw a laser to a wide receiver right over the defensive back. We aren't going to see that this year, right? But I don't know that we want to see it. What we want to see is before the guy starts drifting left, when the running back flashes right in front of his face, he just goes, oh, I got a man-on-man matchup here with a running back who's really good. I'm just going to hit him in stride 5 yards in front of me, gain 8 yards, and live to see 2nd and 2, live to see 3rd and 1, live to see the chains move because you got 7 or 8 yards on that play. And that's just the reality, is that this offense is going to be less explosive overall, but I think we'll have an opportunity to be more consistent because the throws are going to be shorter and the running backs are going to be more involved.
Yeah, I'm eager to see it. I mean, we're hearing the whispers that the offense is going to be a little more open. The running back passing game is part of that. And I see in the comment section as well, uses of the tight ends. Of course, we want to see that. Hopefully, we get to hear from some tight ends at some point this fall camp, in that position group and how they're coming along. But yeah, I don't think this offense is going to be quite as conservative as mainly thought, but it's still going to be run first, I think, but maybe not as run heavy. As long as Graham Mertz and these receivers and these running backs out of the backfield can carry this offense from that angle. So, all right, let's switch position. Let's switch sides of the ball, and let's hear from R.J. Moten. The transfer from Michigan comes in and is going to be a big part of that safety group. And, kind of going back to the beginning of the episode where Billy Napier is calling out open field tackling, where you hope Moten can come in and be a big part of trying to fix that there in this backfield for the for the safety room, the defensive backfield as a whole. But let's hear from Moten for the first time and how he fits in Austin Armstrong's defense.
I'm very versatile, and to see how his defense, I'll be matched up against, in the slot, on tight ends, on running backs, in the box, in the post, and shoot, all over the field, really. So his defense just allows me to maximize my talent.
Praised your communication ability and your football IQ.
Yeah.
What do you take pride in that, and how would you kind of assess that?
No, yeah, I definitely take pride in it. I definitely think my knowledge and understanding for the defense is definitely a big key. But every time on the field, I think that's one of the main components as a good defense. You got to have good communication, and I think it comes from a safety, because I see everything. You know what I mean? And to be able to have my teammates see that I'm communicating at a high level, that definitely that definitely warms my heart.
Looking at your career, there's been a lot of forced fumbles, fumble recoveries. How much of a nose of football you have, and how much is that? You feel like that's a part of your game in terms of takeaways?
Oh, no, yeah. Especially, everybody loves punch out, everybody loves picks, but, the key is not to go out on the field and, try to make them. When those moments come, you have to let those moments come to you, and then you go ahead and make them.
Will, there we go. We hear from Moten a little bit and how versatile he is. And I went back, Will, and I'm going to read an article from MLive, Michigan website about Moten. And this was right before the TCU debacle from Michigan. But it was, his playing time did dwindle late in the season there for Michigan. And this article goes on to say junior safety R.J. Moten was participating in drills with the linebackers, which appeared to be an important development heading into Saturday's Fiesta Bowl against TCU. Now, he did not play in that game, by the way, so I probably should, I should put that here at the beginning of this. So kind of odd, but, they were moving him all around here. But it goes on to say, however, co-defensive coordinators Jesse Minter and Steve Klinkscale said that that has been status quo for the 6-foot, 223-pounder all season. He's been playing dime and safety all year, so certain days I let him do linebacker, and he still gets safety reps, Klinkscale said. We've done it all year because a lot of our packages, he's a guy that we can put down in the box, and he understands the fits. He's really good about learning the dime position, which is really the boundary safety position. Sophomore Rod Moore and junior Makari Page have solidified themselves as Michigan's primary high safeties, but Moten has also played there for most of his college career. Against an air raid offense like TCU's that features dual threat quarterback Max Duggan and explosive receivers, Michigan could deploy more dime packages Saturday with extra defensive backs on the field. With Moten's safety experience paired with his size and physicality, Minter says he brings a lot of versatility to the defense. Quote, he's a jack of all trades, Minter said. He has a body that can play anywhere from safety, dime, linebacker, nickel. He's played all of those different spots for us this year. I think as a chess piece, like when teams are throwing the ball more and spread out, he's better closer to the line of scrimmage. But he's also capable of playing back at safety, and he's done that all year for us. He's a guy, as you gain more time and prep between the last game and the playoff game, you say, okay, where do we need depth? Where do we need create value for guys? His ability to play in multiple positions has really upped his value through the defense. Moten had 31 tackles, 2 sacks, an interception last season. Has been open to playing anywhere since he arrived on campus as a 4-star prospect in the 2020 class. He was recruited to play the Viper position, a hybrid linebacker safety role in former defensive coordinator Don Brown's scheme. While the Viper included more of a pass rushing component, Moten still has frequently lined up in the box in 2022. According to Pro Football Focus, he's lined up in the box on 140 of his 426 defensive snaps, while 219 snaps have been at safety. Moten basically spoke to his versatility. He played in just 23 snaps in the Big Ten championship game against Purdue. That was his lowest since October 29th against Michigan State. But they said he still remains a valuable piece of the Michigan defense. So, Will, taking all that into account, he didn't even play in the TCU game, even in this long article, and everybody talking about him. He never even played in the game.
Which is probably good for him, right? We're not looking at that going,
yeah, he was not part of that debacle, and I'm not going to sit here and say he would have made it any better for Michigan, but he was not part of that TCU debacle for Michigan there. So it is going to be interesting. For all intents and purposes, he looks to be more of a safety for Florida, but it does sound interesting that he can play closer to the box if needed to, that they slide to a nickel roll at times if need to, that dime piece that they need to. Up in the box safety certainly seems like a possibility. He can cover pretty well. Pro Football Focus had Moten with 254 snaps in coverage, only giving up 13 receptions for 103 yards. Where he needs to get better and where the worry comes is tackling. And tackling in open space. That was part of the issue there at Michigan, and it was an issue in the first scrimmage for the Gators. He could whiff there at times. So hopefully a new look, new defensive coordinator, kind of, they like being closer to the box there at Michigan. Hopefully that kind of just bleeds over into what we see here at Florida.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see what they do with him. I mean, you look at it, he's 29 career games with 15 starts at safety at Michigan. And you look at the rest of the safety room for Florida, Miguel Mitchell and Kamari Wilson have 3 starts between them. Mitchell started against South Carolina. Kamari Wilson got 2 starts last year. Nobody else has any starting experience at the safety position. In fact, Manny Nunnery, who's going to be playing linebacker this year, has more starts at safety than anybody else on Florida's roster other than Moten. So, yeah, he's going to get a lot of playing time, and they need it because he's sort of that Cam Carroll guy who's got the experience on the defensive side of the ball, who's hopefully going to be able to calm things down when things go bad. Did we see anything last year from the safeties that make us think that that tackling with those guys isn't going to be something that they're going to be working on as well?
Yeah.
No. And so, hey, there's a guy who has to work on something in his game. I'm not really all that obsessed with it. I think what it does mean is we need to take a look at the overall defensive back room and go, look, Jason Marshall, we expect to be good. You've got Kimber and Devin Moore sort of fighting it out for the other corner position. It looks like Jadon Hill, who's going to be on the inside there. Jadarius Perkins kind of might be a guy who plays some kind of safety in some capacity. But at the end of the day, they're going to need Moten to be a significant portion of what they do. And I don't think it's going to be him up in the box. In fact, if you've got him up in the box, that's probably a bad sign because one of the things is you're really hoping, even with the injury to Boone, you're really hoping the defensive line is going to take a major step forward with Cam Jackson and Caleb Banks coming in as transfers, with Des Watson, Chris McClellan coming back, and Newman Nealon and Tyreek Sapp. You hope that's going to be a strength for the defense, which will sort of ease things up on the safeties. What's really happened the last few years is that Florida's linebacker play has been so bad that the safeties have had to cover up some of those holes.
Mm-hmm.
And they haven't been good enough to do that. I'm not sure that this safety group is good enough to do that either, but I think the linebacker room is a lot better when you consider Wingo coming back, and then you got Taraja Mitchell, Shamar James, and Manny Nunnery there at the linebacker position. I think what you're going to see is each group is better than it was last year and is sort of able to support each other. So it's not just a massive catastrophic failure throughout the entire defense. Because let's be honest, I mean, there were quarterbacks who just never got touched last year. And I don't care who your defensive backs are, they're going to struggle to cover, and they're going to struggle to stay with receivers, and they're going to take chances they shouldn't, which means they're going to miss tackles that they shouldn't, because they know that if they don't make the big play, if they don't get the turnover, that the defense isn't going to get off the field. So that'll be the thing that I think we need to look for Moten. Everybody emphasizes turnovers, stripping the ball, going after, trying to punch it out. That's all important stuff, and you want to do it when you get the opportunity, but you don't want to rely on that as your sole means of stopping the opposition. And so is Moten going to make this a lockdown safety group? No, I don't necessarily think so. Is he going to miss some tackles? Probably he'll miss some. The question will be, are there just some balls that get thrown up as ducks over the course of the year because the defensive line has done its job? And yeah, the safeties got beat, but it doesn't matter because the quarterback had to rush the ball out of there. That just didn't happen very much really over the last 3 years. And so it's going to be everybody working in conjunction that makes this defense better. Moten brings a lot of skills to the table, but he also has some warts. If he didn't have warts, he'd be starting at Michigan, or he'd be in the NFL by now, right? That's the thing, is he's at a position now where he's spent enough years in college that if he had shown out to have that next level ability, he'd be in the NFL. And so it's going to be up to Austin Armstrong to figure out how to shield the limitations that he has, but then also to leverage the experience that he has in order to get the most effective play back there.
Yeah, hopefully there's a lot less one-on-one and breaking down tackle situations for the defensive backfield. Hopefully your defensive line, your linebackers limit those opportunities for those safeties to be in those positions. But it's going to happen. I mean, there's going to be offenses out there that put them in a lot of one-on-one situations, and those guys are going to have to go out there, prove they can make those tackles in the open field. The pretty much negative takeaway there from Billy Napier in that first scrimmage. Hopefully we start hearing as fall camp progresses, first game coming up soon, we hear the Gators can make some steps in those directions. So, all right, good to hear from R.J. Moten to transfer for the first time. Also, Cam Carroll transfer from Tulane right there for the first time, as well as Gators. Excited to see what those guys bring to the field. A lot of experience, of course, from both those guys coming to the Gators this year. So, Will, I know you released it this morning on Tuesday. Before we wrap up here on this episode of Gators Breakdown, your Tennessee toss-up, and I think it was pretty positive for the Gators.
Yeah, I mean, so this whole series is meant to be positive. So for those who weren't tuned in last week, I'm doing a series called Toss-Ups, and so Nick, for our preseason magazine, we put together, we listed who we thought sure wins were, sure losses were, and then games that were toss-ups. And when you looked at Nick and I, we had completely different toss-ups for each team, but I started thinking about it. I said, well, we sit here and we pick apart the Florida roster over and over and over again because that's what we do, right? That's who we know, and that's what we're trying to do. We're looking at these running backs. Oh, RJ Moten, he struggles with tackling, or Etienne, we can't have him kick return, that sort of stuff. But who does that for the opposition? Like when we're putting Tennessee as second in the East, like, are we overlooking some of their holes? And one of the things is when I went back and looked at it, they got 4 guys on their roster from their 2021 recruiting class. And that's that recruiting class from 3 years ago is the one that normally really pays off in this season, right? So the 2023 season, it's always that 2021 recruiting class that leads the way. Next year, it'll be the 2022 recruiting class. Now, Josh Heupel got a little bit of a raw deal just because Jeremy Pruitt got fired for the McNugget stuff, and Heupel came in late. He wasn't in until like 5 days before before National Signing Day, not early signing day. Early signing day had already passed. So those were not his guys who got brought in. So I'm not blaming him for the attrition, but that doesn't change the fact that they got 4 guys from their 2021 class who are still on the roster. They've brought in a ton of guys they brought in a ton of transfers, but even when you look at 21, 22, and 23, they've only brought in 12 transfers on the defensive side of the ball. So typical recruiting class, you've got anywhere between 12, 13, 14 guys on the defensive side of the ball out of the 24, 25, 26 guys you bring in. They've managed to replace that class through the transfer portal, but a bunch of those are guys they brought in this year. So 36 of their guys, their defense is basically really, really thin. And if you look at Heupel's and the job he did at UCF, they were really good offensively every year he was there, but they got worse defensively every year he was there. And so now you got to start asking the question, all right, like, is he able to evaluate the defensive side of the ball? These aren't his guys who are coming in, but he's sort of in that situation where in the third year, a lot of guys take a step back. So, yeah, I mean, I think that there is reason to believe that last year was a carryover from Heupel being able to get all he could out of Hendon Hooker and glossing over some of the holes that they have on the defensive side of the ball. If those holes end up being more significant this year and the defense takes a step back, and then if Joe Milton can't replicate what they got from Hendon Hooker, and that doesn't even mean Joe Milton's bad. It just means if he can't replicate what Hooker did, and Hooker was a Heisman candidate until right at the very end and lost to South Carolina. If he can't replicate that, well, now you've got a team that isn't necessarily going to be this 11-2 juggernaut that's beating people 50 to 10. And when you looked at their defense last year, they faced 6 teams that were in, I think, the top 50 of overall offenses, and they gave up 35 points a game. And then when they faced teams that were 60th or worse, and they faced, I think, like 5 that were worse than 90th, they gave up 10 points per game. So they feasted on poor defenses, and they struggled against – they feasted against poor offenses, and they struggled against elite offenses. And so, look, is Florida going to be elite on offense? I don't think so. But can Florida be in like that 40th or 50th range in terms of offense, especially with the running backs that we've talked about tonight? I think that's entirely possible, which means you're looking at a team coming into the swamp that I'm anticipating is going to give up somewhere between 28 and 35 points. And you score 28 to 35 points, you're going to have a shot to win. Doesn't mean Florida's going to win. Their defense was bad last year too. There's a lot of holes there, right? But everybody's penciling in Tennessee as the number 2 team in the East because of what they did last year. And they're forgetting that just about everybody takes a step back in year 3. That's been exacerbated even more by the transfer portal. And Tennessee just got absolutely strafed with that 2011 recruiting class or 2021 recruiting class. And the 2022 recruiting class wasn't great. And so, I'm sitting here looking at it going, Tennessee ain't the more talented team. Like, on the offensive side of the ball, they might have a better quarterback, and that always makes a difference. So if Milton comes out and it's just absolutely lights out, yeah, Florida's going to struggle. But you're making a lot of assumptions when you start saying that Tennessee has surpassed Florida as a program. I think what it really is Florida's 1 year behind where Tennessee was last year. But we all saw what Tennessee did last year, right? And so there's a possibility that Florida's going to be better than we thought, and a possibility that Tennessee's going to take a step back. So that's what the article's about, and we're going to be looking at over the next couple of weeks. We're going to be looking at a bunch of different games like that. Looked at Utah last week, quarterback position specifically, and actually, interestingly, Utah lost their number 2 quarterback in practice this week. So now all of a sudden you've got a potentially hobbled Rising the second quarterback's out, and now you got the same guy who really struggled in that Rose Bowl last year when Rising got injured. And so, look, everybody's got holes this time of year. Everybody's got unknowns this time of year. We all think we know, but it's interesting. The AP top 25 came out today, and I saw somebody tweet that only 10 of the teams that were in the top 25 last year wound up in the top 25 at the end of the year. And so we think about college football as like this entity where it's always the big guys who are up at the top, and that those teams are always there, and that the top 25 is just sort of a given, and that when you fall out of the top 25, like, oh, that must have been a terrible season and that sort of stuff. But the reality is that, at least 50% of the teams who are in the top 25 are going to drop out. And so Tennessee's 12, Utah's 14. They may be the two who we look at, and when they've gone, 8-5 this year, go, wow, that was a really disappointing season compared to where they started. And, hopefully Florida's up there higher than them at the end of the season.
Absolutely. Hopefully, at least the scoreboard's higher for them when those two nights in September when Florida plays Utah and Florida plays Tennessee. So, Will, good stuff. I think, on that opponent thing, I think I'm going to do that, tease it a couple of weeks ago, just get all the opposing coaches' thoughts on Florida's opponents. So that'll probably be part of an episode next week there as we are not too far away from game days. So the days are dwindling down, and the number of episodes before Florida and Utah play are dwindling down. So I'm trying to have to look forward a couple of weeks and try to map out these episodes, because that Thursday night game is throwing me for a doozy and trying to keep up with a normal schedule, and that's not really going to happen with a Thursday night game. So plenty to get into right there for Florida and Utah coming up. So, all right, Will, anything else, man?
No, just we are putting out some extra content for the magazine sometime this week. I think it's going to be Thursday. Okay. If you already bought it, it'll be coming your way in digital form. If you haven't bought it yet, you can go to readingreaction.com/mag, purchase the digital copy. That's all we got left at this point, but there will be extra content. Broke down Austin Armstrong's defense and some of the plays that he had last year in the game against Louisiana. So that was kind of fun to go do and take a look at that.
There we go. readingreaction.com/mag for your updated Reading Reaction preseason magazine. So, all right, for Will Miles, you can find him on Twitter, X at Will Miles SEC. I am the host of Gators Breakdown, David Waters. You can find me, I'm just going to say social media from now on social media at GatorDave_SEC. Guys and girls out there, thanks for listening to this episode of Gators Breakdown.